What's up everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Filmmaking and Cinematography Podcast. I'm Alex and today we are diving into the art of framing, composing the perfect shot. This is a fundamental aspect of filmmaking that can transform your work from an amateur to a real professional in the domain of cinematography. So whether you're a seasoned filmmaker or just starting out, mastering the art of framing is crucial for visual storytelling. So let's get started. Okay, so let's begin by discussing what framing is and why it is so important. It is essentially the way you compose your shot. It involves deciding what to include in the frame and how to position your subjects and elements within it. It actually is what people see. Framing is what the people that are viewing your film see. Good framing draws the viewer's eye to the most important parts of the scene and can convey emotions, create depth, and tell a story without a single word. So this is the true mastery behind visual storytelling. First, let's start with the basics, so let's talk about the rule of thirds. This is one of the most well-known principles in composition. Imagine dividing your frame in 9 equal parts by 2 equally spaced horizontal lines and 2 equally spaced vertical lines. The idea is to place the important elements of your scene along these lines or at the intersection of them. This creates a more balanced and interesting shot than simply centering your subject. A very basic rule is when your subject is looking directly into the camera, then position it in the center, although this might sound pretty basic. But if the subject is not looking into the camera, then position it on the line opposite from the direction he's looking. So if he's looking to the right, position him on the left vertical line. It is also very important if you're shooting a person, try placing their eyes at one of the top intersections or in the center. This not only draws the attention to their face, but also leaves room in the frame for other elements that can add context to the story. It is also very important to have the right head space so that your shot looks natural and not cut off his head, except of course if you're creating a close-up or extreme close-up. It is also very important to note that the rule of thirds is just a guideline and not a strict rule, so feel free to break it when the shot calls for it. But as a general practice, it can help you create more dynamic and engaging compositions. Just to note, by saying breaking, I'm not meaning to break your camera, just break the rule. Now let's get into some more interesting parts of visual storytelling and compositing, so let's move on to leading lines. Leading lines are lines within the frame that lead the viewer's eyes towards a specific point, usually the main subject. This can be anything from roads, fences, rivers, or even the way people are positioned in a scene. The key is to use these lines to guide your audience focus and enhance the storytelling of your shot. For instance, if you're filming a scene in the park and there's a path, you could position your camera in a way that the path leads directly to your subject. This technique is not only makes your shot more visually appealing, but also helps in directing the viewer's attention precisely where you want it. So the main rule, also with the rule of thirds, but also with the leading lines, is to guide the viewer's eyes. If the viewer doesn't know where to look at, and needs to take time to find the subject or find an important part in your shot, then that shot isn't a cinematic one. But if the viewer can easily identify the subject, can easily see the environment and understand it, and immerse himself into that environment, then you've checked that cinematic shot. You've created a shot where the viewer can immerse himself and can really feel the story behind it. Another important aspect of framing is balance. Balance refers to a distribution of, let's call it, the visual weight within your frame. So just imagine the volume or the area that a certain element takes up in your frame, we'll call that the weight. If you put a huge element on the side of your shot, then we can say that all the weight within the shot is slanted to the side. This was just an example. But there are two types of balance, symmetrical and asymmetrical. Symmetrical balance means that elements on both sides of the frame are equal in visual weight, creating a mirrored image. This could be, for example, achieved just by placing the subject or various elements in the middle of the frame, or having multiple of them distributed symmetrically over the entire image. This type of balance is often used to convey harmony, order and stability. On the other hand, asymmetrical balance means that elements on one side of the frame are not mirrored on the other side. This can create a more dynamic and interesting composition. To achieve asymmetrical balance, you need to consider the size, color and placement of your elements. A large object on one side of the frame can be balanced by a group of smaller objects on the other side, or by using negative space, so just empty space without any elements into it. Let's call it just simple background. My absolute favorite example for this one is one shot from my latest feature film, White Times. I have a shot where we have a perfectly symmetrical room. The table is centered, the chairs at the table are again centered and symmetrical to each other. We have two windows, both symmetrical, a mirror in the middle, a plant in the middle, so everything is perfectly symmetrical. This is a symmetric shot that we see at the beginning of the movie, but after the story persists and we see spoiler alert, the sad story of the man who was left by his wife because his wife died, this means that this shot has become from perfectly symmetrical to an asymmetrical shot because the man stepped in, and this man has a visual weight on the shot that tilts it to one side, creating an asymmetrical shot that shows disturbance, the exact opposite from what the first symmetrical shot has shown. Now let's change a bit the topic to depth. Creating a sense of depth in your shot makes them feel more three-dimensional and immersive. One way to achieve depth is by using foreground, middle ground, or how I like to call it is the subject, and the background effectively. Placing elements at different distances from the camera helps create layers in your shot. These layers can be further enhanced by using techniques like a shallow depth of field, where the background or foreground are blurred while the subject remains perfectly sharp in focus. Another very popular technique to add depth is to use perspective. By positioning the camera at an angle, you can create conveying lines that lead the viewer's eyes into the distance, giving the illusion of depth. Think about classic shots of a long hallway or railway track that seems to stretch into infinity. This type of composition can make your shot more engaging and visually interesting. You could also create perspective by moving the camera left or right, creating some sort of the parallax effect. Another very cool technique is framing within the framing. This is when you use elements within the scene to create a frame around your subject. It could be anything from a doorway, window, or even a natural frame like a tree or branches. This technique is not only draws attention to your subject, but also adds layers to your composition, making it more complex and appealing. A great visual storytelling example using this technique is when shooting through a door or window. Shooting through such an object puts the subject into an engagement. This makes him feel trapped within his thoughts or within that action, and he doesn't have anywhere to escape. Now let's touch on the importance of the horizon line. The horizon line is the line where the earth meets the sky. Placing the horizon line higher in the frame emphasizes the foreground, while placing it lower emphasizes the sky. This is particularly useful in landscape photography, but also in landscape cinematography. Angles are again a very important aspect of your perfect framing. Low and high angle shots can impact the way your audience perceives a scene. A low angle shot where the camera is positioned below the subject eyesight and the subject is looking up can make the subject appear larger, more powerful, or more menacing. On the other hand, a high angle shot where the camera looks down on the subject can make the subject seem smaller, weaker, or more vulnerable. And finally, let's talk about the use of negative space. Negative space is the empty space or unoccupied space around your subject. While it might seem like you should always fill your frame with interesting elements, negative space can be very powerful. It can give your subject room to, let's call it, breathe, so he has space around him. Or it can create a sense of isolation, or emphasize a particular emotion or action. Here, the same example as said with shooting through a door frame applies here too. You can just capture the subject in such a space with not so much space to breathe. This creates a sense of being trapped and, as said, emphasize such an emotion. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found these tips on framing useful and inspiring. Remember, practice makes perfect, so get out there and experiment with these techniques. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate and leave a comment down below. Your feedback helps us improve and bring more valuable content. Thank you again so much for tuning in, and as always, keep experimenting and stay creative. See you next time.